In this Path of Zen podcast, I'm going to be talking about fake Buddhism. So you can recognize fake Buddhism because they tend to have a very particular characteristic about them in that the entire path that the Buddha talked about is somewhat objectified. Usually it'll be objectified as some sort of performance art or some sort of ritual performance arts that one would do. Now, typically, in some situations, I have seen this fake Buddhism displayed, such as turning the prayer wheels in a temple, where the sutras are written in these cylindrical columns that turn when you pass by them, and you put your hand on a particular spot on the wheel and you turn them, it would turn the wheels of the sutras. And this was considered that you are, you're rotating, you're moving, you're putting energy into the sutras. And this was more or less thought to be the practice of the Buddha, that you would go and turn the wheels. So many temples were created and these wheels were installed, and people would come from far away to stand in line and make a donation and then go turn the wheels. And they would look at that as gaining great merits and great spiritual energies from turning the wheels. Well, this particular objectification of Buddhism continues on, and many people would also make offerings to the Buddha statue, which is very different than making offerings to the monks or to the Sangha. But generally they would go and burn incense in front of the statue, or make a food offering, a token food offering. And a lot of times this was considered the practice of the Buddha, which is to make offerings or burn incense. And I actually saw some of this when I was in China, where men would go to the big Buddha statues with the big urns, and they would drop money in the little collection box, and then take a handful of incense, light it, put it in the big urn, and then sort of in a kneeling position stand there or be there, sort of in what they would say is absorbing the Buddha energy. So these were early and often very common objectifications of Buddhism, in where the common person would consider that to be Buddhist practice. Now, in some areas, people would say, well, just bowing at the Buddha statues and paying homage to the images of Buddha is the practice, is what I'm going to do, because that'll bring great merit and future rebirth to a more fortunate location and good karma. And so, again, further objectification of the Buddhist practice would happen this way. Now, in more recent times, we have a whole rash of what I would call performance arts that have arisen, in where Buddhist or at least Buddhist hopeful students are coming to these centers that claim to teach Buddhism, or claim to teach Buddhist philosophy or Buddhist meditation. And they are being told, oh, you need to perform this performance art, which is usually a posture with your body, whether it be sitting or standing or putting your arms in a certain position. And sometimes these schools only have the one position, which would be sitting, or they would have multiple positions that you would move through. And this would be called practice. And this practice, which is really just a performance art, is considered the entire embodiment of Buddhism. And the students are actually not really encouraged to read or study the actual Mahayana sutras, or even the earlier sutras like the Agamas or the Eightfold Path or the Four Noble Truths, because they are told that this position, this holy position that you take, is the Buddha field, and is becoming Buddha. So the students come to these schools and they assume the position, so to speak, and they wait for Buddhahood, and they wait, and they wait, and they wait. Well, generally, and I'm thinking now you can guess what happens, is that after a lot of money spent and donations made and doing these postures, these performance art, for a very long time, nothing happens. And the student becomes disillusioned, and they walk away with this bitter taste in their mouth that, well, this whole Buddha thing, this whole Zen thing, was a big scam. So some notable performance arts in today's culture, and there's three I would like to bring up. The first one is what you would find mostly now in the American Zen centers or the American Dharma centers, which basically are heavily influenced by the Japanese version of Chan, which would be called Zen. And that would be the performance art of what is called Zazen. Now, Zazen, at least coming from the Japanese view of Buddhism, is this idea that was set forth by the 12th century Tendai monk named Dogen, in that sitting like a Buddha statue is becoming Buddha. And he would go in his writings to describe that when you sit in this posture, and he describes the posture of an upright sitting on a cushion, very much looking like a Buddha statue, that you are entering the Buddha field, that you are entering the true divine treasury, and you are opening the Dharma eye. Now, bear with me, because you're going to hear this again and again and again when I speak of what other people are teaching. So he basically stresses that this performance art of this still sitting, this what some people would also call silent illumination, is in fact Buddhism. And this is Buddhism altogether. Now, how does his particular interpretation and teachings hold up to the Buddhist canon, especially the Mahayana canon and the Path of the Bodhisattva? And it doesn't. There's no place in any of the Mahayana sutras and anything in the Bodhisattva path that says sitting like a Buddha statue is becoming Buddha. So Dogen's particular theories and his performance art, though simple and easy to obtain, and you don't have to read books, you don't have to study sutras, and you don't actually have to do anything more than sit there, sit on a cushion, and engage in this serene meditation, this kind of entering the Buddha field, opening the eye of the true Dharma treasury, as he would call it. And I can tell you right now that many Dharma students or Zen students that enter this path and kind of get into this performance art, it doesn't take all that long for them to realize that nothing is happening. Things are going nowhere. And that is because they are not actually practicing Buddhism. What they call practice is just the performance art of sitting. But that is not the practice that Buddha taught. Now, bear with me. I will get to what the practice is in a bit. So other schools within the last 20 years have cropped up, and one of them being a school called Falun Gong. Now, Falun Gong is coming out of China, and around 1996, there was sort of a collapse of the Chinese medical system, and the Chinese people kind of rushed back into the old traditional Chinese medicine, but they also rushed to Qigong because it was kind of rumored and kind of said that, well, Qigong, the movement of spiritual energies, can make you healthy and ward off sicknesses and cure diseases. This was sort of a local superstition, kind of a thing that Chinese people got into. So there was a big resurgence of Qigong, and one of the biggest schools in China that had hundreds of centers everywhere was called Zhonggong. And this was a organization that taught 7 postures that the students would learn, and that they had to perform these postures exactly to a specification and hold them for a certain amount of time. And these postures were said to, each one would infuse them with divine energy. It would bring them holy knowledge and bring them holy energy to make them healthy and ward off illnesses and sicknesses. And so this school went on for quite a while, and it grew and it grew and it grew. And of course, anything that becomes popular is going to always attract rivalry. Other people will come in with their own twist and variations of this particular school. And one of them happened to be a man by the name of Mr. Li. And Mr. Li called his school Falun Gong. And he was very likable, very charismatic. He wasn't as strict or as a disciplinarian as some of the other schools. And he was also more or less an outspoken critic of the Communist Party in China. And that alone drew a lot of students to him, a lot of the ex-Tiananmen Square protesters, and a lot of people took to him because he was very bold and very outspoken about his criticism of the Communist Party. So Falun Gong gained a rather quick following, especially in Hong Kong, where the group grew quite large. And this group, they had 5 practices. So what Mr. Li did, he took Zhonggong and just cut off 2 of the practices, and now he has 5 practices. And that's what he claimed. Well, he said, my 5 practices is more accurate and more cutting to the true Gong. And he would also call anything that he said he would call Fa, which would be, so it's kind of a Buddhist term for Dharma, or for truthful Dharma. And so he also started equating that his school is the same as the Buddhist schools, and that his practices is the same as the Buddhist practices. And it drew a number of people that if all they had to do was the 5 practices in a rotational sequence for a period of time, that they would obtain the powers of Buddha, and they would attain the spiritual energies and the mysteries of Buddhahood. So he would further play on that to the Chinese people as, this is Buddhism, this is the way it is. And so he would infuse his school with all kinds of Buddhist iconography. That would be the swastika, that would be a lot of the Buddhist colors. He would use Buddha images in his school, promoting the fact that, well, I'm a Buddha school. And in 2001, more or less, China shut down all of Qigong. Zhonggong was completely eradicated out of China with all of its centers closed and the teacher exiled into the Caribbean islands where he passed away. And Mr. Li was more or less escaped to America as a political refugee and continues today with his fallen Dafa, as they call it now, and continues to spread this idea that his 5 postures is the entirety of the Buddhist teachings, and that's all you need to do. So we have Dogen, we have Mr. Li, and then lastly we have the particular version of Vipassana called Golinka, in where he claims that his Burmese tradition holds the authentic meditation of Siddhartha Gautama, and that only his school and only his lineage has that. And it's a body scanning technique that he teaches when his students sit in these long periods of sitting meditation without moving. And this is again a performance art and a objectification of Buddhist teachings, and something where the students are fascinated by, because, well, if all I have to do is sit my way to enlightenment, let's go do that. How long can that take? A week or two? A month? Well, if somebody said, hey, look, I got this practice where you can sit your way to enlightenment. It may take a few weeks, a month, maybe a year if you're just really slow, but it'll happen. Well, pretty much anybody's going to sign up for that. And, say, okay, well, how much is it going to cost? Because, enlightenment's pretty cool and might be fun at parties to show off my enlightenment. So, hey, sign me up. Well, like the other schools, the same thing with this Zazen and this Qigong from Falun Dafa and this Vipassana from Golinka, nothing happens. The students perform these practices, they become very diligent, they become very faithful, they become very dogmatic with them. They try to rationalize in their mind that the reason why they're not getting anywhere, it's them, that they got the problems, that somehow they're not understanding it, or they're not doing it right, or there's something is happening that is preventing them from actually achieving enlightenment. And they're flabbergasted and frustrated to find out what it is. Because they're doing the practices, they're attending the sessions, they're going to the what they call practice sessions, and nothing is happening. No changes, no spiritual energy, no Buddhahood, no enlightenment, nothing. They are finding themselves worse off than when they entered. In fact, I've even heard people tell me that they wish they never even began this, because they were far better off before they started than after they go through these kind of things. And they become disillusioned and they become bitter, and they say this whole Buddhist thing is a ripoff. This whole Zen thing is a scam. Wasted thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Years of one's life pursuing something just that isn't so. Now, if you are a true Buddhist practitioner, you already know why it doesn't work and why these things fail. But for those of you who are now asking me, well, why did they fail? Why are these things fake? Why are they false teachings? And that is because these are not the practice of Buddhism. The practice of Buddhism, and this is where we'll get into what real Buddhism is now. The practice of Buddhism is essentially summed up in the words of relinquishment and abandonment. Now, I'm not saying that sitting meditation is wrong. There is a use for sitting meditation. It's just that it's not the totality of Buddhism. It is not that you're entering a Buddha field and opening the true Dharma eye. And any posture or form that you take, it may have a teaching for the moment, but it in itself is not the totality of Buddhism. Now, people will say, well, I sit and then I body scan and I notice all the pains and the aches in my body, and I say shunyata. I say it's just an arising and it'll pass. It's just an arising and it'll pass. Well, you have a human body, and everything in this phenomenal world is just an arising and it'll pass. There's no real enlightenment in that, other than the fact that everything is transitory. And I think we learned that pretty much at an early age, that everything is transitory. This body, this culture, everything around us changes from moment to moment to moment. So why are we sitting then and saying that, oh, my body aches and pains and everything in my mind is changing from moment to moment to moment, when we already know that? Now, in the Zen centers with the silent illumination, you're told to, you just sit there and you just let thoughts come and go, and thoughts come and go, and thoughts come and go. And if you got an ache or a pain, you just let it come and go. Now, yes, it is true that over a period of time of continual still sitting, the body will become accustomed to it. And the aches and the pains will diminish on their own. That is a natural thing of having a human body. And it doesn't mean just because, one day that you're sitting and the aching and the pains in your knees and your joints is abating, that doesn't mean you're enlightened. And it doesn't mean that you're gaining progress. That just means that the body itself is becoming accustomed to those positions. And the endurance factor to hold a posture, hold your hands over your head, or hold your hands in a barrel in front of you for a prolonged period of time. Just because you can do it for 20 minutes, assume this posture, standing and not move, doesn't mean you're enlightened. It doesn't mean that you're a Buddha. It just means that your body has grown accustomed to these things. Now, a lot of people are, they would say that, well, when I sit zazen, I have this serenity of mind, I have this peace. And it's like, well, of course you do. It's because you got nothing to do. You're not going anywhere. You're not looking at anything. You're just sort of sitting there, and you're bored out of your skull. So your mind goes inward, of course. And then, of course, you're looking at your thoughts coming and going, coming and going, coming and going. Shunyata, shunyata, shunyata. Rising and falling, rising and falling. But that's not the practice of Buddha. That is not what we were taught. That is not what he taught. So what are we talking about then? What does the Mahayana say? What does the Path of the Bodhisattva say? Because, after all, if you say, well, I'm a Zen student, well, you're saying that you're on the path of the Mahayana. That's saying that you're a bodhisattva. So what are we supposed to do? What is this thing called practice? Because if you're saying to me that practice is not sitting like a Buddha statue in the Zendo, then what the hell are you talking about? What I'm talking about is the relinquishment of self, the relinquishment of all those things that you call myself, those ideas, those patterns, those habituations, all that stuff. I go sit in the Zendo. I become Buddha. Well, if you relinquish that, you abandon that, then perhaps at that moment you're practicing true Buddhism. One of the things that a lot of Zen teachers will say, and I think they say it without really understanding what they're saying, is that in order to achieve enlightenment, you have to abandon enlightenment. And you might hear this, you might have heard this already, and I can guarantee you go into a Zen center, you will hear it quite often. But really what it is, it's an alluding to what is the practice of the Bodhisattva. And that is, we look at all these things in our mind, because it is the mind that suffers. The body is always suffering. That just happens. Age itself creates the suffering there. But that's not the suffering I'm talking about. I'm talking about the suffering of mind. The suffering of the attachment to an idea, the attachment to a permanence of yourself. Oh, I'm beautiful. Oh, I'm smart. Oh, I'm strong. These are crude, but they kind of get into the essence of the practice, which is to relinquish that. Relinquish being beautiful. Relinquish being smart. Relinquish being strong. Relinquish being, oh, I'm so wealthy, or my positions in society are very important, or my job is important, or my memberships in all these clubs is important. So as the Bodhisattva, we take on these vows of relinquishment. And we take on these vows. And these vows are very interesting vows. They're like vows of, being vows of charity, vows of not being selfish, vows of being generous, but also, vows of, living a moral life. And really, when we say, well, what does that mean, living a moral life? Really what that means is that you're no longer creating suffering for yourself and others. Morality is not just a bunch of rules out of the Bible, not a bunch of commandments from a faceless God that maybe you do or do not believe in. Morality, in the Buddhist sense, is those things that you do that cease suffering for yourself and those around you, but also furthermore promote the goodwill and the pleasantness of a society around you. Because remember, we're not the only people on this planet. There are countless sentient beings out there. And making their life a hell on earth isn't exactly conducive to helping them become Buddhist or helping them achieve liberation themselves. That is essentially when I'm talking about the true Buddha practice, which is the relinquishment of all these things that create suffering for yourself and others. And you will find that Buddhism is a renunciate path. It is a path of the ascetic. Now, there is what I would call minor asceticism, and then the extreme asceticism. The extreme asceticism would be somebody who we would call a monk, who publicly takes vows of asceticism, where like they're just not going to own anything. They're really not even going to have a name. They're just going to give up everything. Sexual relations, given up. Money, given up. Any position in society, given up. Everything is given up. That at least is the noble intention, but in reality, that's a whole nother issue. So, but the smaller ascetic, the minor ascetic, you could be a layman, you can be a householder. It's just not attaching to all these things. Vilamakirti, the Buddha's greatest disciple, was a layman. He had many wives, many properties, vast fortune, but those really meant nothing to him. He was not attached to them. He did not make those himself. He did not go up to the Buddha and say, hey, I got all these wives, I have all these properties, I have all these riches, I am helping all of your monks out. I'm feeding them and I'm clothing them and I'm making sure that nobody is coming along and killing them. Gee, how great am I? Never crossed his mind. He looked at the Buddha and said, hey, look, I have all these positions and responsibilities, and honestly, if I was to relinquish those right now, they'd just go to somebody who would abuse those and misuse them. So I'm just going to remain a layman, not take vows of not take the Samanera vows of an extreme ascetic, and learn the Dharma, which the Buddha says, hey, that's fine, because you're a great disciple, you're learning everything, you're doing the practice, there's really not, you don't need to take these extreme vows. And that is the truth of it. You don't have to live the life of a monk in a monastery to achieve Buddha's enlightenment. So, the true practice of Buddhism is always to look within yourself for the attachments, the clinging, the aggregates of in your mind that causes suffering, that creates the self, that creates the fuel. Now, people would say, well, if you have a body and you're in this phenomenal world, there's always going to be something. And that is true. There always is going to be something that comes up. Something that will always generate self. You could be in a blissful moment and driving in your car, and then suddenly somebody in front of you cuts you off, and you're like, oh, you son of a bitch, why did you do that to me, you jerk, you cut me off. Well, where the hell did that come from? Where did that outburst of anger? Because you have some territorial things going on and you have some attachment to my space. You drove in my space. You cut me off. You got too close. I've seen this before with even Zen teachers. They look at you like, you're getting too close to me. You're in my space. You get the hell away from me. And it becomes very interesting. I've seen it's like those are the moments in where you have the opportunity to practice, where you can say, aha, a little bit of hidden self, a little bit of clinging, a little bit of something in there was hiding in there, and now I found it and I could root it out and take one more step towards enlightenment. So the real practice is not sitting in a zendo on a cushion. The real practice is being out in the world, doing everyday things, and letting those every ordinary days, bring up all the millions of attachments that you have, all the little clinging and all the little nuggets of self that are buried deep down, and exposing them to the Dharma, exposing them to practice, which is relinquishment and abandonment. It's not sitting on a black little cushion in a zendo, breathing incense. There was once a teacher who would say that, oh, the zendo, that is where we practice Zen, that is where we relinquish ourselves, and that is where we practice. And somebody said, well, what good is this Zen only in the zendo if I can't do anything with it? Does it only exist in the zendo? Does it only exist when I'm sitting on that cushion in that Buddha style? And the teacher is like, oh, no. You take, the Zen with you out the door. You continue the practice of the serenity, the letting go. And somebody goes, so, teacher, do I bring my cushion with me then wherever I go? I just don't kind of get how that works. And the teacher's like, no. You don't bring your cushion with you wherever you go. You just take the practice with you wherever you go. And of course, you can see the little question marks above the student's head and a lot of looking around in confusion. And then, of course, you get this laughter, this and it's not because they're understanding. That is because they don't understand. It's this laughter of, okay, I don't have a clue, but it's what it is. This is a problem in where we've lost. Somehow we've gotten into this fake Buddhism. We've gotten into this idea that performance art is Buddhism. Performance art is the path. Performance art is somehow going to save us. Performance art is somehow going to bring us the enlightenment. And I can tell you, surely, that none of that will work. Now, some of you know this, and you full-heartedly agree. Yep, none of that works. Nope, not at all. But some of you don't. You're still thinking, well, no, it'll work. Just give it time, and I'll eventually, one day, I'm gonna be sitting there, and then, bing, enlightenment, and then I'll go ring the dental bell and claim that I'm enlightened, right? No, it never happens that way, and I've never seen it. People will say, no, it'll come. Well, I've been doing this for 5 years. I'm sure in another 5 years it'll happen. It's just, around the corner. It's coming. It'll happen. It never happens. And that is why? Because they're not doing the Buddhist practice. So you ask, okay, so you're saying that I'm in fake Buddhism. So how did this happen? How did we get here? How did any of this happen? And I would have to say, well, look, fake Buddhism always is there. I've looked throughout history, and there's always some sort of objectification to the path, whether it be turning wheels or bowing at Buddha statues or offering incense. There's always fake Buddhism, and it's mostly for the insincere, those that really do not have a full interest in Buddhism, but it gives them something to do. Sometimes it's just allowed because it's a path to the door, so to speak. And it can sometimes be a preliminary to true practice. Sometimes a student has to go through fake Buddhism before they can actually be ready for true Buddhism. Now, I know this can be very difficult to accept that. Oh, well, so you're saying that I spent 30 years in fake Buddhism? It is possible. Given, if you look at the recorded sayings of some of the old Chan masters, there were many students who practiced 20, 30 years in fake Buddhism before they encountered true Buddhism. And when they did encounter true Buddhism, they made significant progress in a very quick time. And this is something that I bring up in where one of the other indications of fake Buddhism is that there is no progress, or the progress is so slow and so long in taking that you're going to go several lifetimes, multiple lifetimes, to even make one iota of change. Whereas in real Buddhism, the path of the Bodhisattva is the most expedient and the quickest path to enlightenment, and it always works in this lifetime. So fake Buddhism, fake Zen, is very prevalent in our society and culture. And it's something that, as a Zen student, I say you want to be a Zen student, you really have to examine this. And then when you do know what real Buddhism is, you have to be on guard for fake Buddhism, because it can come at you in many different ways and in many different styles. Now, sometimes, like I said, fake Buddhism is just a path to the door of real Buddhism. And then sometimes it truly is just for the insincere, those that are trying to make a quick buck, those that are trying to build a church or some sort of organization, mostly for the grandizement of themselves, not for the Buddha. And you'll see that too, where organizations celebrate their teachers, or they celebrate their founders, or they celebrate their current membership, or they celebrate their current teacher. But nowhere do you see them celebrating the Buddha. You'll see that a lot. You go into the Zen center and you're bowing at the teacher, not necessarily at the Buddha. And the teacher and the teachings of the Zen Center are put front and center, not the teachings of the Buddha. These are big warning signs that you're probably engaging in fake Buddhism. So these are things that I advise you to look at and to ponder and to question when they come up. Is what's going on here? Is this really about the Buddha and the teachings of the Bodhisattva, or are we really just dealing with ego stink? That of the group, that of the center, that of the teachers. I see it in YouTube a lot. Sort of this praise and this devotion to the performance art. People will say, "Oh my goodness, the practice of vipassana is mind-blowing and life-changing, and you should get into this." Really? So you're telling me that a performance art is going to bring me to enlightenment? And how come I haven't read about this in any of the Buddha Sutras? How do you say this? By what means is any of this supported? Can you point to me 5 people that are enlightened by this practice? Well, of course, they're not going to be able to point to anybody. They will say, "Oh, yeah, well, people think the teacher's enlightened," but I'm like, really? That the teacher doesn't even say they're enlightened. So what's up with that? And they're like, "Well, it's the teacher says that, this is the authentic meditation of Buddha." I'm like, really? Then show me where in the Buddha Sutras that this is reflected. And they can't. Same thing with Dogen. They say, "Well, Zazen is the path to enlightenment. You just got to do Zazen. Zazen is great. This is what we do. We go on sesshin, these retreats into the mountains, and we sit 6 hours of Zazen a day and meditate. Well, has Zazen worked? Can you point to me to 5 people in Zen that are considered to be enlightened? Can you point to me where in the Mahayana Sutras that Zazen is supported? No, they can't. And they struggle with that because that becomes an article of faith in that particular direction. And you see this all throughout YouTube and the internet in various places, the praise of these performance arts as the practice. But never do you really see them praising the practice itself, the true practice, because that's hard. I don't want to be doing that. To have to break open my entire thing that I call myself, and to expose it to you, to the Sangha. I have to bear open all of my things that I deeply hid away, all the embarrassments, all of the misdeeds, all of the transgressions, all of the things that I have done in my life that I am embarrassed about. Now I have to break open and reveal that to the Sangha, reveal that to the light, reveal that to the Buddha. Oh, screw that. Because that's hard. That is really tough. You have to be like a very strong spiritual warrior to bear open your soul like that and to confess your misdeeds and to confess all these things that you call yourself. All these things that you say, this is me. You have to be strong to say, this is me and I stink and it's bad. Smell my stink. Nobody, you're like, I ain't gonna do that. I ain't gonna do that. I'm just gonna go sit here, be quiet, and just sort of hope that enlightenment happens, I hope. And they wimp out because it's a weak practice. Zazen is a weak practice. Falun Dafa is a weak practice. Vipassana is a weak practice. With a weak practice, you're not going to get anywhere. It's just, you can spend lifetimes, multiple lifetimes, hundreds of lifetimes, and barely make a move. This is why the Mahayana scriptures exist. This is why the path of the Bodhisattva exists. Because we make the vows. We make the great vows. We make the vows to relinquish. We make the vows to be charitable. We make the vows to save all sentient beings. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, that means then, I got to go out and save the bums and the homeless and save the planet and save the animals. No, that's not what it means. Spiritual salvation means bringing the Dharma to sentient beings. And this is what it means. The Dharma is the truth, the liberation of this cage which we call ourselves that keeps dragging us again and again and again into this phenomenal, putrid cycle of rebirth. So, if you're tired of this, you're tired of the cycle, you want out of it, the Bodhisattva path. If you're still thinking that, hey, this is a fun house and I'm not ready to go, no worries. We'll catch you in the next lifetime then, I guess. The teachings are always going to be here. So this is my end of the podcast. I hope that anything here I said has caught you. I'm not telling you what to do or what to think or what to believe. These podcasts are mostly to, help you be reflective, help you think. Decide for yourself if anything I'm saying has any merit or not. Decide for yourself what is and isn't Buddhism, because I'm not telling you what to do, what to think, what to believe. I'm just telling you what I think and believe. All right. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you again soon.